So many people ask me why, after a lot of cool cars, I've ended up with this BMW E36. Well, in today's video, let's answer that question. Before we get started on today's videos, I'm really grateful a lot of you guys do enjoy watching my videos, but the majority of you don't subscribe. Please head down and hit that subscribe button and let's get cracking. Good morning everybody, my name's Pat and welcome back to 2PJZ. Hello if you're new and a warm welcome back if you are a returning viewer. On today's video, I wanted to do something a little bit different and something more casual and sort of a get to know me type style video. And we're tackling a topic that I get asked a fair bit by people is they say, Pat, you've owned so many different cars. You've owned an FDR X7, an R32 GTR, you had a new BMW M135 and so many more. Why have you ended up with an E36, which a lot of people think is a little bit of a shitbox? My answer to that is quite convoluted and long, which is why I decided to make this video. And yes, I'll admit this car is cheap and it's cheerful and it's fun and it does sort of fit into that shitbox territory, but I wanted to answer why I've decided to pick this. I've had experience with a lot of different cars and this car is pretty special in its own way. You know, I don't think a lot of people give E36s enough credit for what they actually are and for what you can do with them. So I decided to make this video to tackle a few of those questions. One thing I do want to point out before we get too much further is that yes, my sunroof cover is currently missing. It did break a little while ago and I have one on the way. It's just taking forever to get here. So if you do notice this at any point in the video being missing and it is annoying you, I'm really sorry. That is going to get fixed. Let's get back into the video. First aspect of this is the most honest and real one, and I want to on this channel be as real as I can with you, and that's the cost. So obviously at the moment cost of living is quite high. I bought this car in July last year after I'd already bought a house, so I was sort of stretched for cash. I had my M135 and I thought at the age that car was at that it was going to start being the sort of thing that would cost me a bit more to run. It had about 180,000 kilometers on it, and you know, when things go wrong on those newer BMWs particularly, they're not all that cheap because there's a whole bunch of different electrical sensors and other problems and things that just break and can be quite tricky to track down what the root source of the problem is. So I thought, okay, I could see the writing on the wall a bit for that car and what was to come. So I sold that and bought my Toyota Crown. I had that for a little bit. I did a full video on all of the cars and why I sold them, so you can go and check that out. I won't get into specifics about that right now. I thought, it was a bit boring and I had some issues with my hybrid battery, so that paired with it being boring, I thought, oh, not really worth keeping. And then I thought, what's something really cool and fun that I can buy for under $10,000? And the reality of that answer is that there wasn't a lot. These days, it's pretty tricky to find a really nice car, a really cool car that ticks all your boxes for under sort of even 30 grand here in Australia. So E36s are still quite cheap here. I did a full video on the pros and cons of owning an E36 where I do mention the cost and how cheap they are to buy here. So go and check that out as well. Open a new tab and suss that after. I bought this off a good friend of mine, Matt, who's spent a lot of time looking after it. And I thought, okay, this is something that I can buy that's cheap and cheerful. Didn't cost me that much to buy. It doesn't cost me that much to maintain because fuel's relatively cheap for it. It's not a massive tank. Insurance isn't that much because it is a cheaper car. You know, it's not even worth $10,000 on my insurance policy, so that's not a big cost. And when stuff does go wrong, which does happen in these cars because they've been around for so long, you know, this car is a 28-year-old car now, so when things do go wrong, there's plenty of information on the internet, there's plenty of parts available, so you can fix a lot of issues yourself. I fixed the radiator and changed the majority of the cooling system while I was at it, considering they're big issues that you face on these cars. And that took a few nights of my time and I think under $500 to do the whole job, which was awesome. And if that had happened on my M135, I wouldn't have been able to do it myself because there's a whole lot more involved with those cars. And I think a radiator alone for that car is only, I checked it was almost like $1,000. So cost was a big factor on this. As I mentioned, I do own my own home and that's my priority in terms of what I can afford, and what I'm paying for is all my money sort of going to trying to pay down the mortgage on that house. And I just wanted something I could drive that still was really cool, still was quite fun, and that brings me to the next point of being an analog feel. One thing I missed a lot when I had my M135 and my Crown was a car that actually makes you feel like you're driving it, if that makes sense. So the M135 was a great car. It was really fast. It was my first car with paddle shifters, and I found that really fun, you know, just being able to whip through the gears, but it wasn't that analog manual feeling like you have in this car. When I wanted to buy another E36. I wanted to buy one that was manual like this one is here, and there's no assists or anything to help you drive this car. It's essentially just you and the car, and you can probably tell how shaky the filming is a little bit, that this car is no frills to it. It's just you and the car and the road, and I think that's what makes cars so special, and I really miss that feeling. So I absolutely love a connected feel with the car, and that's what the E36 gives you. Like, don't get me wrong, I would kill to have a brand new G80 M3 to drive around in every day, because sometimes driving something very old does get a little bit tiring, but I don't really drive that much anymore, so it is always really special when you do get inside of it. And it's everything to do with the car. It's the smells, the way it feels, even the way it creaks when you're just driving around. You know it's old, you're not expecting it to be a brand new car when you get into it, but for me, driving this car just makes me happy, and it's something that I really enjoy, and I have enjoyed driving it for a year, even though I have had new cars. You know, it was pretty difficult at the start to get used to driving something so old again, especially when you've got new features like cruise control, heated seats, an electronic dash, you know, all that sort of thing. Those nice creature comforts you get used to are hard to sort of forego when you do get back into an old daily driver like this car. But for me, and I think for you, if you are considering buying one of these, you won't be disappointed, because they are very, very special and they are very cheap, which is just two things that really blend well together. Is that you get in this, it's not worth $1 million, so you don't have to be stressed about how you're driving it, where you're driving it, where you're parking it, but you can still have that appreciation of what is becoming a classic car now. So if you are looking to buy one of these cars, I do totally vouch for them. If you are driving something new and you're finding that it's not leaving you with that same sense of enjoyment and happiness that you got in some of maybe your previous old cars, or you always hear about people feeling connected to their cars, but you haven't experienced it yourself because you are driving something that doesn't really make you feel that way, then buy one of these, because I almost promise you that that will change. The feeling that this car gives you is great. You know, they are loved all over the world, as I mentioned before, because of that. It's not just because of how they look, it's not just because of the engines that they came with, but it's just the feeling that they give you when you are out and about driving them. And do get one with a 6-cylinder engine. I have had one with a 4-cylinder engine, and it made me feel none of these things. It made me feel the complete opposite. So get one with a 6-cylinder, make sure it's been looked after, and if you're getting into it and you're scared because you've got no knowledge about maintenance or servicing or whatever, that doesn't really matter. I'm not a master mechanic by any means whatsoever, and I was able to change, as I said, the radiator and the cooling system by myself on this car just by watching a few YouTube tutorials, and did the oil as well, which is pretty straightforward. There's no sensors or anything you have to disconnect. It's a pretty basic oil change like most older cars, so don't stress about that. If you want one, I say just get one. I want this video to be something that, as I mentioned, is just honest and real and based on my ownership experience. I dive a bit deeper into the car in my pros and cons video. So again, go and check that after this, and that will probably help your decision making if you're looking to buy one of these as well. Another reason that I bought the E36 after getting rid of my modern cars is the way it looks. And even in stock body form like this car is, it looks absolutely fantastic. I've put the Style 66 alloy wheels on it, which a lot of people do with their E36s. These are off an E39 M Sport, which fit the guards really, really nicely. And other than that, it is completely bone stock, and these cars look fantastic. And I mentioned this in my pros and cons video that I did on the E36 a little while ago. It's just how cool these cars look, and they were touring cars, and they have that whole racing pedigree. And I think these are some of the single best old BMWs ever made. And they just have that feel and that look to them of that classic mid-90s styling, which is something I really resonate with and something I love in cars. So again, for me, buying this car was a lot to do with that personal connection and how it makes me feel when I get into it. And anytime I buy a car, I buy one because it makes me feel good. Something else I need to mention is the reliability of this car. I bought it not expecting it to be as reliable as it has been, and I've been blown away, honestly, by how reliable this car's been. They get a bad rap. Old BMWs all get a bad rap. Like, I've owned an E30, an E46, and this is my second E36, and pretty much all of them have actually been okay reliability wise, but this by far has been the best. And it just shows that if you put the time into regular servicing and maintenance, which doesn't really cost that much and it's not really that hard to do, these cars do look after you and they do like to be driven. This car's got 265,000 kilometers on it now, and it is really, really nice to drive. It's still quite punchy, feels good. I had the aircon replaced, so that works really well, and that didn't even cost me that much. So besides the aircon and the radiator, which are two things that have both been fixed pretty cheaply and quickly, this car has been really, really nice to to drive. So a lot about buying this car for me is the personal connection, and this car just makes you feel good when you drive it. Like every time I buy a car, I buy one because it's something that I think is going to make me feel good. I've never bought a single car or motorbike out of the 26 that I've owned that doesn't give me some sort of personal satisfaction, and you'll be the same if you like cars as well. I don't imagine you'd ever buy something, unless it's a very cheap daily driver that you just need to get from point A to B, that doesn't actually make you feel good. So for me, I bought this because I've always loved E36s. I think they're some of the best cars that came out of the 90s, and you can do so much with them, which brings me to my next point. Even though this car is stock, I bought it with the intention of keeping it stock because I did mention that cost factor before. I don't have all that much money to play with to be modifying cars like I used to when I was younger and I didn't own my own home. But I bought this knowing that if I did choose to, I could do almost anything that I wanted to modification wise. I do have an M3 bar and side skirts to go on the car that I will be getting painted and doing a video on very soon. For now, even just looking at it stock, just with the wheels on it, makes me really happy. And every time you go out, doesn't matter if you're at a car show with young people or old people, you get people of all ages coming up to talk to you about it, which is another big thing for me, is the whole community aspect around these cars. They have such a cult following, and all across Australia, all across the world, either people who are into drift cars, I know people who race these, and I know people who just modify them for the street. And everyone who loves E36s just loves seeing what other people do to their cars. So whether it's the old guys who love their Beamers who come up to me at car meets to talk about it, or even younger guys, heat-platers, even some of you who might be looking at buying one of these as your first car. It doesn't matter what age you are, these cars appeal to everyone, which I really love. And it's always just nice when you're driving out and about and you get a little thumbs up, or you get someone wanting to come and chat to you about it. So that's another big reason why I decided to get back into something like this. It has a lot more soul, I think, than what my M135 and particularly my Toyota Crown have. So there you have it. That's why I ended up buying this car. And if you do have any more questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to answer them if there's anything that you feel like I missed or didn't cover off on. And before we completely wrap up, I do really want to plug my social media channels. I do a lot of work on my Instagram and TikTok. I'm really trying to build those channels up. I do short form content every day. I'm trying to make content that I've always wanted to see that you don't really see, which is, I guess, the whole point behind this YouTube channel, and a lot of behind the scenes stuff, car explainer videos, and all sorts of little fun things that I like to do that I hope people enjoy. So head down, check those out. I would really appreciate all you guys heading down and following those channels, because as I said, I do put a lot of work into them. So make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me to bring you better and more interesting car content, and we'll see you next week.